Here's another panic stop, this time filmed in slow motion. The nose drops about 3 inches. The rear wheel hop is extremely evident. After this one, heat buildup was intense, and we had to let him cool down. This Charger handled the reverse spin very well. With all the slack out of the suspension on one side, body lean was excessive. However, our driver felt that recovery was smooth and easy. In cornering, a little understeer is prevalent, but not nearly as bad as the 440 version. The front end stayed glued pretty well on this car, but with only 318 cubes, it lacked the power necessary to bring it through the turn in a drift. Up front, we had independent, unequal length control arms with torsion bars. In the rear, a rigid axle, semi-elliptic leaf springs, and an anti-sway bar. The dimensions have changed. The wheelbase has been reduced by 2 inches, the overall length by 3, thus giving a more compact feeling. And yet the car is actually wider by 2 inches, thereby allowing more people room. Besides being pretty, this new Charger gives a much greater feeling of safety and security. Come to think of it, that just might be what cars are all about.
When plushier cars are built, Buick will build them. And today's test car comes from the top of the Buick totem pole, the Riviera. It's all new, from bumper to bumper. If you're looking for something about as smooth as liquid velvet, then this is it. You know, the boys in Flint, Michigan take a lot of pride in this car, and we were anxious to ring it out.
This ultra-posh performer offered us several surprises, the first of which came during the acceleration round. The speedometer walked up to 30 miles an hour in 3.4 seconds. It's kind of rare to get this much wheel spin from a 4,400-pound Detroit go-mobile, but the Riviera left rubber. 5.2 seconds later, we had 45 miles an hour. By the time we went for the 60-mile-an-hour run, the tires were hot and grabbing. 8 quiet seconds later, the clock stopped, and we had the best times we've ever recorded on a full-size Buick. If there's such a classification as a sporty, personal, luxury-type car, the Buick Riviera has to fall in that category. But not only that, it has to be placed in a niche near the top of the heap. From a styling standpoint, it's all new, and it's pretty. There's more people room in this new model. That's probably because it's bigger overall. The interior is about as luxurious and comfortable as your own living room. For a hauler, the 455 cubic inch V8 is standard. So is the 4-barrel carburetor and the 3-speed automatic transmission. The compression ratio, 8.5 to 1. As per usual, Buick brakes are some of the best in the industry. From 30 miles an hour, it only took 36 feet to stop. Our tester came with the power disc brakes up front and composite cast iron drums in the rear. From 50 miles an hour, we dragged rubber 94 feet. All of our stops were made in a good straight line with little or no correction necessary. This braking system dissipates heat rapidly. Pedal fade was very slight. From 70 miles an hour, it took 197 feet to grind to a halt. There was quite a bit of dive on the front corners when we pushed her through the pylons. Anything over 40 miles an hour and the rear end would go squirrely. Rebound and recovery, fair. The Riviera went into the reverse spins well, but it comes out with a lunge hard enough to lift the front wheel, plus rattle your head around inside the helmet. High-speed cornering has never been the long suit for any Buick, and this one wasn't much different. Body lean was excessive, and when we pushed it harder, there was a marked tendency to wallow through the turns. In this standard Riviera, we had the wishbone with coil springs up front and a live axle with coils in the rear. The GS version comes with a heavy-duty suspension, and it makes a lot of difference. The dollar difference for the beefier suspension is very slight, and I still can't understand why Buick doesn't make it a standard offering on all of their full-sized cars, especially when it gives much greater stability, security, and safety. With the Riviera, it appears that Buick might be trying to reach the mature ex-Stage 1 driver who wants a bigger and more luxurious car. But can still recall the enjoyment of a car that handles well. I wonder if this one will fill the bill.
Well, that's it. And I think you'll agree she's a smoothie. We'll be right back in 1 minute. This is the one Ford takes to the racetracks. You know, this Torino GT must have been a better idea because it picked up a bundle of checkered flags. When the new 71s came off the assembly line, the changes were very slight. But then, of course, when you've got a winner, you don't hurry back to the drawing boards. We, however, do feel that the performance on this new model is better. But I'll tell you what, judge it for yourself.
You're looking at it, a real, honest-to-goodness supercar in 1971. Apparently, no one told Ford about smog emission, high insurance premiums, and the new legislation-sponsored safety laws. Somewhere, I heard that the supercar is dead. But at Ford Motor, it's very much alive. We got the tester we wanted, 429 cubic inch engine, 370 horses, heavy-duty suspension, and without all the accessories that add all the power. When we fired it up for the acceleration runs, it was great to feel the muscle. We had 30 miles an hour in 3.4 seconds. We felt that these runs would have been considerably better with F60-15 tires. Our tester had the standard G70-14. 45 miles an hour took 5.4 seconds. We had the standard 350-to-1 rear axle ratio. The optional 391 or 430 would have made a big difference in the ETs, but as it was, it still made 60 miles an hour in 7 seconds flat. Making the Torino go was obviously the prime consideration. Making it stop seemed almost like an afterthought. This showed up in the braking tests. We had 11.3-inch discs in the front with 10-inch drums in the rear. The brakes began to fade on this 50-mile-an-hour stop, and it measured 96 feet. On this 70-mile-an-hour panic stop, the brakes were hot, pedal fade very noticeable, rear axle hop was prevalent, and quite a bit of correction was necessary to keep it in a straight line. We ate up 204 feet. In the pylon runs, the car felt strong and massive. It seemed to stay flat as our driver pushed through the cones at over 50 miles an hour. This is where the heavy-duty suspension really pays off. Rebound and recovery, excellent. With all the parts hot and really working, we took the Torino out on the track and turned it loose. That 429-inch hauler up front made it possible to bring it through the turns with accelerator, power on, and rubber smoking in a four-wheel drift. For a while, it felt like 1969, when the supercar was king. They employ heavy-duty independent coil springs, shocks, and torsion bars up front, with heavy-duty leaf springs and shocks in the rear. Axle hop was quite noticeable in hard, high-speed cornering. This was probably due to the rear suspension being poorly located. Stiffer shocks could have made the difference, especially in rear-end control. They seemed to be too soft for the spring rates. In all of our cornering, there was a lot of tire squeal and horn honking. You suppose they'll ever get rid of that rim blow steering wheel? While there were several changes we'd like, testing the Torino Cobra was still fun. And it did prove one thing. The muscle car is still alive.
We've tested a lot of Oldsmobiles, and in particular, many 88s. We've always liked them. But this newest edition is the best one yet, for many reasons. Take a look. The Olds 88 is all new for 71, as are all of the big cars from General Motors, from Chevrolet right on up through Buick. Not just in the styling department, but they've also been re-engineered from bumper to bumper and feature greater interchangeability of chassis parts than ever before. The styling of the new Oldsmobile leans a little toward the fuselage shape, thus giving more shoulder room on the interior than in the past. For go power, this Delta had the top-of-the-line 455 cubic inch V8, topped by one 4-barrel carburetor, delivering 320 horsepower at 4,400 RPMs. For obvious reasons, when testing a big luxury car such as this, we never expect much excitement in the acceleration runs. But this one turned out to be a better than average hauler. 30 miles an hour took 3.8 seconds. The second time out of the hole, we had 50 in 5.9 seconds. With the tires hot and all the parts really working, we ran our best 60-mile-an-hour go in 8.8 seconds. By the way, Oldsmobile still features positive valve rotation in all their new engines, thus putting them in a good position to handle the upcoming low-octane, lead-free fuel. I think the biggest surprise with our tester came in the stop department. In the past, good brakes have never been a strong feature in the Olds we've tested. This stop took 36 feet. The 50-mile-an-hour stop was made in a good straight line, little or no correction necessary, and it took 94 feet. On this 70-mile-an-hour panic stop, heat buildup was not excessive and pedal fade at a minimum. It ground to a halt in 197 feet. That's a tremendous improvement over previous models. Our test car had the heavy-duty shocks and torsion bars. This beefier suspension system goes out as an option for about $16. It's well worth it. It enabled us to run the pylon course faster with more stability and less body leak. Rebound and recovery were good. Here's that same run head-on in slow motion. At 45 miles an hour, you can see the suspension and tires really working. For a big 4,300-pound hauler, our driver was able to bring the 88 through the corners with comparative ease. This car shares some of its suspension components with Buick. As a result, they've adopted Buick's camber compensation system. With this method, the camber opposes the shift of the center of gravity. It's very effective in high-speed cornering, as well as minimizing the effects of heavy crosswinds on the highway. All Oldsmobiles feature the latest GM safety innovations for 71, guardrails in the doors, a double-panel roof, which acts essentially as a roll cage, also a steel barrier between the rear seat and the luggage compartment. In the time that we had this car from the factory, we were amazed at the number of people who thought it was a 98. It's almost as plush, and for my money, a better buy. Time that we had the Gremlin, we received enough varying comment to fill a book. The reactions ran the full gamut. Some thought it was the cutest car on the road. Others, the ugliest. One fellow told us that the front half looked like a pretty nice car, but they must have lost interest when they got to the back half and just ended the whole thing in a hurry. Another said he'd rather be seen going to work on a skateboard than in a Gremlin. Well, like I said, the reaction was wild. But you know, we also heard that same similar comment several years ago about a car they nicknamed the Beetle. Well, regardless of the likes and dislikes, the Gremlin is selling. And during the introduction in Palm Springs, California, we asked Roy Chapin how they named the car.
We were looking for names, and names are hard to come by in the automobile business. We wanted something that would mark it as distinctive and unusual and controversial. And frankly, we felt that we used it as a code name originally, and it stuck, and everybody seemed to be accepting it, and then we went out and tested it in the field. We had what we call a clinic, where we ask a lot of people what they think about it, different sorts of names, and it came right out on top, almost without qualification. In fact, the only people who had any sort of negative connotation were the ones who had recollections, perhaps, of World War II, and those were a very, very small percentage, about 7%, as a matter of fact, and they were all people well up in the middle 40s and 50s.
With the Gremlin, American Motors hopes to be remembered as the company that got there first. The front half is pure Hornet. It's in the rear they go their separate ways. The Gremlin's wheelbase has been shortened by 1 foot to 96 inches. That's 2 inches longer than the VW. With anything heavy, the up and over process of loading can be a little difficult through this rear window. This is the free sunroof that allows you and Carol to enjoy the sun in the morning, the moon at night, and an occasional glimpse at a passing bird. For power, our tester had the 258 cubic inch 6, delivering 150 horsepower. We needed this additional power with the air conditioner. In the acceleration runs, it took 4.1 seconds to make 30 miles an hour. On the way to 45 miles an hour, the clock ate up 6 seconds. Without any wheel spin or excessive tire wear, we made 60 miles an hour in 10.4 seconds. While this may not be newsworthy enough to write home about, it is better than the times of the other domestic minis. In the braking tests, the Gremlin left something to be desired. From 30 miles an hour, we stopped in 41 feet. On the higher speed stops, they got hot. The pedal faded severely, and from 50, it took 94 feet. In the 70-mile-an-hour panic stops, the short wheelbase aggravated the process. Nosedive was excessive. On this one, we chewed rubber for 214 feet. With 58% of the weight in the nose, the car displayed the same front-end dive tendencies when we ran through the pylon course. In the front, the Gremlin has independent suspension with coil springs, upper wishbones, and lower arms with leading struts. Our maximum speed through the cones was about 40 miles an hour. Here's the same run head-on in slow motion. Now you can notice excessive body lean. Rebound and recovery, only fair. This one kind of makes you dizzy, but if you're interested, the turning radius is about 35.5 feet. For a suspension system in the rear, they employ a solid axle with leaf springs identical to the Hornet, except that in this car, with the reduced rear overhang, the leaf springs had to be cut shorter than in the Hornet. This caused some axle hop during the acceleration runs and gave the rear end a light, squirrely feel while cornering. When going into a turn, the car has strong understeer, and there's a far cry from enough power to bring it anywhere near neutral. On the good side of the ledger, it's heavier than its competition, thus giving it more stability in a crosswind. It has more power, enabling better acceleration and passing. And when you see it on the road, you don't mistake it for anything else. It may lack a few things, but originality is not one of them. Oldsmobile's compact offering of the Omega is pretty much of a rerun. The same 3 models that were introduced last year are back again. The 2-door coupe, 4-door sedan, and this hatchback coupe. Our tester carries an S after the Omega, which signifies sport options and a higher price tag. We had the optional 350 cubic inch V8 with 4-barrel carb. The 256-cylinder is standard. The Omega rides on a 111-inch wheelbase with 200 inches overall. Compared to most of the 74 models, it's got a little wallop. We ran 30 miles an hour in 4.2 seconds. The second time out of the hole, we had 50 miles an hour in 8.6. The Omega took to cornering at high speed pretty well. This was due largely to the rally suspension package and the steel-belted radial tires. Both are optional, but well worth the extra money. The balance of weight in this car is excellent. The curb weight is 3,438 pounds, with 1,752 up and 1,686 in the rear. Body lean was more apparent on the outside than it was on the interior. And even with the stiffer suspension, the ride factor was not bad.